13 girl groups that the world forgot about. There are certain things that define the 2000s: low-rise jeans, reality TV, Ugg boots, and flip phones. But apart from fashion crimes and flash games, the decade was also defined by its music. Following the success of several girl groups in the 1990s, like Destiny's Child, the Spice Girls, and TLC, record labels around the world were trying to cash in on the craze with their own versions of the girl power formula. Some were massive successes. Others barely lasted an album cycle. But along the way, they gave us childhood anthems, iconic fashion moments, and plenty of behind-the-scenes drama. Today we're going to be taking a walk down memory lane and revisit some of the girl groups from the 2000s, from the hitmakers to the has-beens. Let's get into it. Long before Fergie was talking about her lumps, she was little Stacey Ann Ferguson. In 1984, when she was 9 years old, she was cast in the children's program Kids Incorporated, which explored adolescent issues through popular music, kind of like if Degrassi and Kidz Bop were combined. Years later, she and her fellow cast member Renee Sandstrom decided to form their own girl group, New Rhythm Generation, alongside their friends Stephanie Rydell and Heather Holyoke. Their first single, Get Crazy Work It, dropped in 1991, and the group started performing at nightclubs and showcases. Not long after, Heather left the group for college, and her place was filled by Mickey Duran. NRG was slowly building momentum, but following a dispute with their management over the group's name, they made the decision to rebrand as Wild Orchid. In 1994, they signed with a record label, and 2 years later, their self-titled album hit store shelves, but minus Mickey, who had left the group to pursue acting. The trio spent the next year promoting the project, even opening for 98 Degrees and NSYNC, but the album never reached the heights they were aiming for, perhaps because its soulful ballad direction wasn't really what was selling at the time. Still, they pressed on, and in 1998 followed it up with Oxygen, which was an even bigger commercial disappointment, something that was quite surprising, as the girls seemed to be on the up and up otherwise, opening for Cher and Cyndi Lauper, and hosting the Fox competition show Great Pretenders. Wild Orchid began working on their third album, Fire, but after poor ticket sales and the lukewarm reception to Oxygen, the project was repeatedly delayed. Eventually, the label refused to release it altogether, and by September 2001, the group had been dropped. Disappointed by these failures, Stacey left Wild Orchid, leaving Renee and Stephanie to continue as a duo. In 2003, they self-released another album, Hypnotic, which failed to make an impact, and with that, Wild Orchid quietly faded into obscurity. For Stacey, this low point was also a turning point, and she re-emerged as Fergie and climbed to the top of the charts as a member of the hip-hop group, the Black Eyed Peas. With so many music groups making the rounds in the 90s and 2000s, you really needed something special in order to stand out, which is why I think Wild Orchid failed, where the Black Eyed Peas thrived. In 2005, Columbia Records formed a group made up of supposed music prodigies that they called the Valley Girls, a reference to the members' San Fernando Valley roots. Each of the 5 tween-aged members played a different instrument, with Raquel Houghton on lead vocals and violin, Allie Mackey on keyboard, Little Nix on drums, and sisters Danielle and Esty Hyam on guitar and bass. The Valley Girls intended to defy the stereotypes of the girl group genre, with an emphasis on their wild personalities, cultural diversity, and creative spirit, something that was reflected in their wardrobe, which was way more Hot Topic than it was limited to. Pop punk was exploding at the time thanks to the likes of Avril Lavigne, Paramore, and All Time Low, but it hadn't really broken into the preteen market, let alone with a girl group. But by combining these two successful strategies together, the label hoped that they'd struck gold. The Valley Girls wound up singing the theme song for the Trolls cartoon, which was the go-to move for girl groups at the time, and were also featured on the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants soundtrack with their song Always There in You. According to their label, they were also working on their debut album, Valley Nation, but before it was completed, Esty and Danielle left the group because of creative differences, and the Valley Girls came to an end before they even got started. You can't say they didn't make the right choice though, because not long afterwards they joined forces with their younger sister, Alana, to form a little band you might have heard of, Hyam. In 1999, Brian Lukow formed the boy band Dream Street, which was marketed as the kid-friendly version of the Backstreet Boys. At first, things looked promising, with Lukow even saying that they, quote, reeked of money. But by 2002, the dream turned into a nightmare following a lawsuit between the boys' parents and the producers, leading to the group's disbandment. Lukow had no intention of giving up though, and in 2003 he tried again, only this time with girls. Now he knew he couldn't just recycle the Dream Street formula, saying, quote, If the boys are cute enough, the girls will come. But with girl singers, you have to make them something their female fans can aspire to. So he decided to build out a concept, creating 5 characters with distinct styles and personalities, and thus, Huckapoo was born. From there, he held an intense round of auditions with hundreds of applicants, and he wound up picking girls who weren't necessarily the best dancers or singers, but embodied the vision he had in his head. Brittany Lamb became Twiggy Stardom, the bubbly cheerleader. Brooke Morey played PJ Bardot, the hip-hop queen. Jordan Price took on Groovy Tuesday, the sensitive hippie. Brittany Segal was Angel Sparks, the tough biker chick. And Lindsay Nyman rounded things out as Joey Thunders, the resident punk rocker. The girls barely had time to learn each other's names before being sent on the 2004 Camplified tour, alongside other up-and-comers like Angel Faith and the Bloody Lovelies. The idea was for labels to test out their tween projects on a live audience, but Huckapoo's reaction was lukewarm at best, and the most attention they were getting was from Disney, with Huckapoo being featured on the soundtrack of Pixel Perfect and That's So Raven. Still, Lukau seemed convinced that they were on the verge of greatness, already planning out Huckapoo dolls, clothes, cosmetics, books, and even an animated series. Mind you, they didn't even have an album yet. Talk about counting your chickens before they hatch. With Lukau refusing to compromise on any aspect of Huckapoo, including the terrible name which the girls hated, morale plummeted. And in April 2006, Brittany Segal announced that she was leaving. Although the group tried to push forward as a quartet, by 2008, Huckapoo was no more, and all that we have to remember them by are a few Disney Channel bops. In 1998, talent scout Debbie Fontaine selected 13-year-olds Holly Arnstein, Ashley Poole, Alex Chester, and 14-year-old Melissa Schumann to front a girl group called First Warning. After a successful meeting with Sean Diddy Combs, they were signed to Bad Boy Records and rebranded as Dream. In more recent years, the girls have said that the contract process was incredibly intimidating, and they were allegedly pushed to sign this new agreement without talking to their own lawyers. When Alex resisted these tactics, she was cut from the group and replaced by 13-year-old Diana Ortiz. Dream released their debut single, He Loves You Not, in 2000, where it climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, proving that there was interest in the group. And when their debut album, It Was All a Dream, was released in 2001, it went platinum, although critics were less impressed, calling the songs generic and the sexy image inappropriate given the girls' ages.
Hey ladies, isn't David a hottie?
They spent the next year on tour, opening for Destiny's Child, NSYNC, and Nelly. But in 2002, Melissa Schumann announced her departure to pursue acting. At first, the group considered continuing on as a trio, but 15-year-old Casey Sheridan was later recruited as Melissa's replacement. And with this new lineup, they began recording their second album, Reality. Their first single, Crazy, went in an even more adult direction, a shift that was credited to Diddy himself. But the girls weren't too happy about it, with Holly Arnstein even saying, quote, "We always had this mentality that we were real. We were really friends and really in love with music and having a good time. Suddenly, that wasn't the game. It was how much weight can you lose and how sexual can you be?" Reality was scheduled for release in May 2003, but was repeatedly delayed, and ultimately dumped online later that year with no promotion. Soon after, Bad Boy Records dropped the group, and Dream quietly disbanded. Over a decade later, in 2015, the original members of Dream reunited to perform an a cappella version of He Loves You Not, which was followed by a comeback announcement. True to their word, the following year they released a new single, I Believe, which was followed up with a handful of promotional performances that included Casey Sheridan. But this revival was short-lived, and by October 2016, it was announced that they had disbanded once again, seemingly for good. Formed in 1996, this Irish girl group was made up of 17-year-old twins Adele and Kiwi Lynch, 18-year-old Lindsay Armo, and 23-year-old Sinead O'Carroll. They first went by Butterfly Farm, then Sister, before eventually settling on the name Bewitched, which was very of its time. In 1998, they released their debut single, C'est la vie, which shot to number 1 on the UK chart, and their self-titled debut album dropped later that year, followed by Awake and Breathe in 1999, which were both certified platinum. Even though their look was more t-shirts and jeans than miniskirts and high heels, critics are quick to dub them the Junior Spice Girls, a comparison that grew even stronger as they continued dominating the charts. Bewitched got real popular real quick, and their insanely catchy songs were featured in dozens of iconic movies and TV shows from the time period, like Smallville, Charmed, Bring It On, The Princess Diaries, and Sabrina the Animated Series. They even had their own doll line. That's how big they were. But despite all of this, their label didn't seem to have much faith in them, and midway through the development of their third album in 2001, they were dropped. This forced hiatus didn't go over well, and by 2002, the group officially disbanded. In 2012, Bewitched got back together for the TV series The Big Reunion, whose success led to a UK and Ireland tour. In 2014, they released an EP, Champagne or Guinness, which is a really cute title if you ask me, but it didn't make much noise despite being their first new material in over a decade. Apart from their 25th anniversary tour in 2023, their most notable project in recent years was another EP, Ripped Jeans, which failed to chart. I wouldn't say they're going strong, but they're still going. In 2000, musician and talent scout Layla Badge opened auditions in her home country of Sweden to search for the next big musical group, one that she hoped would rival ABBA. She eventually found 11-year-old Anna Sundstrand and 13-year-olds Anis Lamesh, Faye Hamlin, and Rosie Munter, who became Play. Like a lot of girl groups, they were each assigned personalities. Anna was the cute one, Anis the wild one, Faye the cool one, and Rosie the funny one.
What makes you cooler than the other girls?
I don't know. I'm just so cool.
However, these unique identities weren't really reflected in their clothing, as they opted for more of a unified look that was trendy and edgy. In hindsight, some of the outfits might have been a bit questionable considering how young they were, but at the time, I just thought they looked cool. In 2001, they released their first single, Us Against the World, which was a surprise success, charting not only in Sweden, but the US, Germany, and France. In 2002, they headed to the States to promote their debut album, where they served as the opening acts for 18's, Aaron Carter, and Destiny's Child, a pretty prestigious gig that was credited to Play's co-manager, Matthew Knowles, Beyoncé's father. That year, they also performed at a handful of prestigious events, including the Macy's Day Parade and Miss Teen USA, which is pretty ironic considering they were, Swedish. The album was chock full of bubblegum pop classics, which would later appear on the soundtracks of several movies and TV shows like Holiday in the Sun, Lizzie McGuire, The Cheetah Girls, Ghost World, Beauty and the Beast 2, and The Master of Disguise. Personally, I prefer the Cheetah Girls version of Cinderella, but did you know that Plays was also a cover? And the original was actually released by the short-lived girl group I-5 2 years earlier. In 2003, they released their second album, Replay, which was a touch more angsty than their previous record, focusing on romance and heartbreak instead of friendship and fairy tales, which felt like a pretty natural progression considering their ages. Things started to unravel in 2003 when lead vocalist Faye Hamlin left to go to college, and 13-year-old Janet Leon was tapped as her replacement. Funnily enough, they had her dye her hair red, as if hoping that they could trick kids into thinking that Faye had never left. Their branding just seemed a little confused at the time, and in all honesty, Janet just didn't seem like a good fit for the group. Maybe because she was so much younger than everyone else was, and Play's distinctive, four friends just hanging out vibes completely disappeared. A few months later, Play released Don't Stop the Music, their weakest selling album, and it's not hard to guess why. For one, fans might have felt iffy about the new lineup, not having any time to get to know Janet. Secondly, the album went in a very juvenile direction that didn't really reflect how the girls and their audience were growing up. And thirdly, their cover-heavy formula was just feeling kind of stale, failing to highlight any personality or artistry. From there, it was a downward spiral, with their 2004 holiday album, Play Around the Christmas Tree, and the 2005 compilation, Girl's Mind, both failing to chart. They didn't go on tour to promote any of these new projects, and in September 2005, it was confirmed that they were splitting up. Some of the girls went to college, while others continued dabbling in music, but none achieved the level of fame that Play had seen during their heyday. In 2009, Faye Hamlin and Anis Lamesh teased a reunion, which they followed up with the introduction of a new member, Sanne Carlson, who was added to the lineup after the other girls were unable to join, making this new version of Play a trio. The group participated in the reality TV series Made in Sweden, which showed the process of bringing back Play, including finding their new member and recording their first new single, Famous, which was released in 2010 and reached #1 in Sweden. I don't remember their version, but I do remember Big Time Rush's cover. The trio released the album Under My Skin, which I honestly found too generic compared to what other girl groups were doing at the time, but it still saw a bit of airtime in Sweden. Later that year, they recorded a song for the Disney Channel original movie, Avalon High, but fans were quick to notice that Faye Hamlin's vocals were nowhere on the track, and after she failed to appear during promotional events, Play confirmed that she had left the group once again. In 2011, she was replaced by Emily Norenberg, who also dyed her hair red so she could play the part of a Faye dupe, and Anis became the only member to appear in every iteration of Play. Although there were plans for a new EP featuring this lineup, by the end of 2011, the group was over for good, and I can't help but think that clinging to the Play format was the very thing that was dragging them down. In 2000, the reality talent show, Pop Stars, began airing in Germany with the goal of creating a 5-member girl group. Over 4,000 people auditioned, with only 32 of them making it to training camp and the official competition rounds. Nadia Benissa, Lucy Diakovska, Sandy Moling, Vanessa Petro, and Jessica Walls were the finalists, and following a public vote, they became No Angels. Because the group was so blatantly manufactured, a lot of people doubted their staying power. But against all odds, their debut single, Daylight in Your Eyes, jumped to the top of the charts in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. Their debut album, Elements, was similarly successful, eventually becoming one of the best-selling German records of all time. Their follow-up album, Now Us, gave the girls more creative control and cemented them as more than just a one-hit wonder. Compared positively to the Spice Girls for their sound and lineup, they even followed in their footsteps by losing a member, with Jessica Walls departing in 2003 because of her pregnancy. The remaining 4 pushed on with their third album, Pure, which moved away from bubblegum pop, a risk that didn't exactly pay off, as sales of the album were incredibly disappointing. After 3 back-to-back releases, the girls were exhausted, and they announced their plans to disband at the end of 2003. And after holding a farewell concert, they went their separate ways. This was rather short-lived, however, and by 2006 they were back, minus Vanessa Petro, who chose to focus on her solo career. No Angels released their 4th album, Destiny, in 2007, and while their vocals were praised, the songs were slammed for being generic, and it wound up becoming their worst-selling record. Still, in 2008, they were selected as Germany's entry into the Eurovision Song Contest. As one of the most watched events of the year, this was quite an honor, but unfortunately, the group wound up placing 23rd out of 25. Ouch. They picked themselves up and began working on their next album, Welcome to the Dance, which went in a more electronic direction to appeal to international audiences. However, the project was delayed several times, something credited to Nadia Benissa's ongoing legal issues. In 2009, she had been accused of grievous bodily harm, and during the highly publicized trial, she admitted to having unprotected sex without disclosing her HIV status. This was leaked to the press, and with No Angels guilty by association, the group lost several endorsements, and Welcome to the Dance severely underperformed. They still embarked on a small tour without Nadia's participation, but she soon announced that she would be leaving the group, saying that her scandals had overshadowed their work and that they would be better off without her. Although a live album was teased, nothing materialized, and after several years, they finally confirmed that they had broken up once again. In 2021, No Angels held their first live performance in a decade, and following the positive reception, they began working on a new album, 20, which included a few original songs and updated versions of their biggest hits. It debuted at number 1 on the German charts, proving once again that nostalgia always wins. And over the last few years, they've embarked on several tours in celebration of their past and present work. In 2002, Britain tried their hands at the Pop Stars formula, creating a girl group and a boy band who would go head-to-head in a battle of the sexes for the best charting single. Starting off with 10 finalists in each group, their numbers dwindled until there were only 5, with the female group, Girls Aloud, including Nicola Roberts, Kimberly Walsh, Sarah Harding, Cheryl Tweedy, and Nadine Coyle. Coyle had previously auditioned for an earlier season of Pop Stars, but was disqualified after it was discovered that she lied about her age, so her return was quite a comeback.
My name's Nadine Coyle from Larkhill and Derry, date of birth 15th of 6/85, making me a Gemini. And then she thinks for a second and goes, what date of birth did I say now, 15th of the 6th? And then it fades, and she's outed herself on camera.
The group's debut single, Sound of the Underground, shot straight to number 1 on the UK singles chart, cementing them as the show's winners. A few months later, they dropped their debut album of the same name, followed by What Will the Neighbors Say in 2004. Both were certified platinum, and each of their singles reached the UK top 10. They quickly became a staple of 2000s pop culture, with their music appearing in St. Trinian's Love Actually and It's a Boy Girl Thing, the group becoming the face of Sunsilk, and even launching their own line of Barbie dolls. And by the end of the decade, they had secured the title of the UK's best-selling girl group of the 21st century. After 5 albums and millions in sales, the group announced a hiatus in 2009 to pursue solo endeavors. They reunited briefly in 2012 for their 10th anniversary, releasing a new single, appearing in a documentary, and promoting a greatest hits album, 10. When the tour wrapped, they announced that they had split up once again, which wasn't exactly surprising given how busy their individual careers had become. After replacing Sharon Osbourne as a judge on the X Factor UK in 2008, Cheryl quickly became the group's breakout star and even earned the title of Nation's Sweetheart. Because of her success on the show, she was also invited to judge the US edition, although she wound up leaving after only a few weeks. She released her debut solo album, 3 Words, in 2009, which was followed up by several other albums throughout the 2010s. But if I'm being honest, to American millennials, she's probably best known as Liam Payne's baby mama, with the two dating from 2015 to 2018. Although they had first met back when Liam auditioned for X Factor back in 2008. Nicola Roberts released her own album, Cinderella's Eyes, in 2011, which was praised for its vulnerability and its differences from Girls Aloud. She had co-written every song on the album, and seemed to really enjoy that creative process, later writing for Little Mix, Tinashe, and even Cheryl. Kimberly Walsh tried her hand at music with the 2013 album, Center Stage, but her bigger successes were on camera, where she appeared in a few movies, competed on reality shows, and was a talk show presenter. Nadine Coyle had a few career setbacks when Girls Aloud first split up, with several projects falling through, but she eventually released her solo album, Insatiable, in 2010. While she dropped a handful of singles in the years that followed, none made much of an impact, and she largely stepped away from the spotlight to focus on her family. Sarah Harding released a solo EP in 2015, but became better known for her reality TV appearances, including Don't Stop Me Now, The Voice of Ireland, Celebrity MasterChef, and Celebrity Big Brother, which she actually won. In 2020, she announced that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and a short year later, she passed from complications of the disease at the age of 39. In 2022, the remaining members of Girls Aloud organized an event to raise awareness and funds for breast cancer research, and in 2023, they announced a reunion dedicated to Sarah's memory, which wound up becoming the most successful arena tour of the year. I'm sure you've heard of the Pussycat Dolls, but did you know there was an attempt to make a spinoff? In 2007, the reality TV show Pussycat Dolls Present began airing on the CW, and followed a group of 18 girls who fought for a spot in the singing and dancing girl group. The series was popular enough that a second season was released in 2008, but instead of auditioning for the Pussycat Dolls, the 15 contestants were hoping to be selected as one of the 3 members in a brand new group, Girlicious. It was basically America's Next Top Model, but for the music industry. The girls lived in a house together and competed in improv challenges and group performances, and each week one person was eliminated and told to hang up their boa. They were mentored by choreographer Robin Antin, who had created the original Pussycat Dolls format, and she served as the show's version of Tyra Banks alongside fellow judges rapper Lil' Kim and music producer Ron Fair. Although Girlicious was originally going to be a trio, during the season finale, Robin Antin surprised viewers by selecting all 4 finalists: 19-year-olds Nicole Cordova, Tiffany Anderson, and Natalie Mejia, and 20-year-old Christina Sayers. The quartet had already begun recording their debut album while the show was being aired, and after the finale episode, they premiered 2 of their new music videos, Like Me and Stupid Shit. In August 2008, they released their self-titled album, and while it received positive reviews from critics, it didn't perform particularly well, at least not in the States. To promote the album, they opened for the Backstreet Boys' Unbreakable tour, which they followed up with their own tour in Canada, where the album unexpectedly took off, even being certified platinum. That same year, they were also nominated for a Teen Choice Award as Breakout Group, but lost to none other than the Jonas Brothers. With their strong visuals and vocals, Girlicious had a lot of potential in those early days. I just think they leaned a little too heavily into their sex appeal. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the hotness, but it would have been nice to see a bit of vulnerability and mystery from them, instead of the whole "I'm so hot" thing 24/7. I mean, even the Pussycat Dolls had Stick With You. In June 2009, Tiffany Anderson announced that she had left the group, citing that Robin Antin and the label were heading in a new direction, while also alluding to some conflict between her and the other members. In interviews, the remaining members of Girlicious would say that the group was always meant to be a trio, and they adapted quickly to the new lineup, with Nicole taking over Tiffany's parts in their existing songs. A few months later, the group started recording their second album, Rebuilt, which went in a more pop-centric direction than the hip-hop R&B sound that they had established previously. Although it maintained the sexy party girl vibes of the first album, it failed to make an impact, and despite releasing 3 singles, only one, Maniac, got a music video. Never a good sign. In 2010, trouble started brewing, with Natalie Mejia being charged with drug possession after a routine traffic stop in LA, which she pled guilty to. A few months later, she and Christina confirmed that they had left the group, but all hope wasn't lost, as Nicole hinted at a different iteration of Girlicious with new members, but nothing wound up coming from that. Around the time Girlicious disbanded, Robin Antin was attempting to rebuild the Pussycat Dolls, which had lost several of its members, including lead singer Nicole Scherzinger. Christina was initially announced as one of these new additions, but in 2012 she abandoned the project to start a solo career. She was subsequently replaced by Natalie, who also dropped out in order to focus on motherhood. In 2013, Nicole made an appearance on the X Factor USA as part of a different group, Girls United. And I do think it's funny that in interviews, she makes absolutely no mention of her time with Girlicious. Girls United made it through the live auditions, and considering X Factor UK's success with Little Mix, it seemed as though Simon Cowell was genuinely toying with the idea of making them a full-fledged group. However, they were eliminated from the competition pretty early on, and while they continued releasing cover songs over the next few years, they seemed to have broken up sometime in 2014. Music executive Chris Stokes had seen moderate success in the late 90s with boy bands IMX and B2K, but in 2001 he decided it was time to cash in on the growing popularity of girl groups. He started building the group around Amber Streeter, who he had signed to his record label TUG when she was 14. After a series of auditions, they found their 3 other members, 15-year-olds Davida Williams and Ashley Gallo, and 17-year-old Keisha Henry. The quartet were subsequently named TG4, short for Tom Girls 4, with Amber explaining in an interview, quote, "When you're a girl and you act like a boy, you're a tomboy. We're girls and we act like guys, but love being girls. So we're Tom Girls." This feminine meets masculine quality was reflected in their clothing, which was as sporty as it was sassy, and the group named J-Lo, Missy Elliott, TLC, Timbaland, Janet Jackson, and 3LW as some of their music and style inspirations. TG4 released their first single, Virginity, in 2002, which reached number 88 on the Billboard R&B charts. As the name suggests, the song discussed losing one's virginity, but their intention was to let young girls know that they didn't have to have sex if they weren't ready. I'm not gonna lie, if you listen to the lyrics, the message kinda gets lost in all of the sexy innuendo, and I'm actually surprised they got any airtime at all, considering how risque the subject matter was. Around the same time, they began to make appearances alongside their big brothers, B2K and IMX. This promotional strategy was credited to their shared management, and that summer, TG4 embarked on the Scream 2 tour as the opening act for Bow Wow and B2K. Riding this momentum, TG4 released their second single, 2 Minutes, but it failed to chart, raising concerns about the group's potential, and even though they filmed a music video for the song, it was scrapped. TG4's debut album, Time for the New, was slated for release in October 2002, but to the surprise of fans, it wound up being shelved permanently, perhaps because of 2 Minutes' disappointing performance. Shortly after, B2K were heard on the radio calling the girls unfocused and saying that they blew it, and even though TG4 were set to star in Chris Stokes' dance film, You Got Served, it began filming without them, hinting at rising tensions within the TUG family. Having previously appeared on shows like Sister Sister, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Lizzie McGuire, Davida later announced that she would be leaving the group to focus on her acting career, and shortly after, TG4 was dropped by their label. The remaining 3 seemed determined to continue their music journey and signed with Soul Chemistry, where they subsequently rebranded to Tom Girls Forever. But Forever wound up being only a few months, and in 2004 the group fully disbanded without ever releasing a new song. In 2005, Keisha joined the girl group Dime, but they broke up in 2007, and the following year, she actually appeared on the Pussycat Dolls Present Girlicious, but was eliminated in the first episode. In 2007, Amber Streeter, now going by 7, joined Rich Girl, who released an EP in 2009 and a mixtape in 2011. Although the group definitely had potential, even opening for Beyoncé at one point, none of their singles charted, and in 2012, they disbanded. 7 embarked on a solo career, and aside from her own projects, she also wrote songs for several artists including Alicia Keys, Ariana Grande, Usher, and Chris Brown, whose label she was signed to for several years, and she's the only member of TG4 still in the music business. In 1996, talent scout Ronald Lopez, the brother of Lisa Left Eye Lopez, formed a girl group that included 14-year-old Brandy Williams and 16-year-olds Shamari Fears and Natina Reed, with the two older girls having been a part of a different music group a few years earlier. Left Eye took the girls under her wing, which I think is pretty apparent from their visuals, and she eventually landed the girls an audition that got them a deal with Columbia Records. In 1999, Blaque released their self-titled debut album, which became a certified hit. It spawned 3 successful singles, 808, I Do, and Bring It All to Me, which appeared in the 2000 movie Bring It On, an arrangement no doubt inspired by the girls' casting as the Clovers. I just wish they'd gotten more screen time. Their second album, Blackout, was set for release in 2001, but the project was shelved after the group was dropped from Columbia Records, a decision that I truly don't understand. The group signed to Elektra Records in 2002 and began working on a new album, Torch, but their luck didn't seem to be improving, and this project was similarly scrapped. Disheartened, Natina decided to take a hiatus from the music industry, while Shamari and Brandy began pursuing solo projects. There didn't seem to be any bad blood between them, however, and from 2005 to 2009, the three occasionally got together to work on a new album, Private Show. A few of the songs from this project made their way onto YouTube, but the whole album has never been released, and Blaque went on yet another hiatus. In 2012, the trio reunited to perform at the Left Eye Music Festival in honor of their late mentor, which seemed to get their creative juices flowing, and they announced plans for a new album and reality TV show. But just a few weeks later, tragedy struck, with Natina Reed being killed in a car accident at the age of 31. Without her, the group decided that they couldn't move forward, and Blaque's story came to a heartbreaking end. In 1996, the popular English new wave band, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, disbanded after nearly 2 decades in the industry, deciding it was better to go out on a high note than become a desperate has-been. However, their former frontman, Andy McCluskey, wasn't done making music. He knew that synth pop was out, but bubblegum pop, it was just getting started. In 1997, he collaborated with his former OMD band member, Stuart Kershaw, on a handful of songs, and before they knew it, they had an entire album. The problem was, they didn't have anyone to sing it. McCluskey hosted a round of auditions, where he found 16-year-old Liz McLarnon, 17-year-old Carrie Katona, and 14-year-old Heidi Range. They settled on the name Atomic Kitten, but in 1999, Heidi left the group due to creative differences. I'm assuming she was just a touch too young for the direction McCluskey was planning to take them in, and she was subsequently replaced with 17-year-old Natasha Hamilton. In November 1999, they dropped their debut single, Right Now, which performed moderately well, and they followed it up with See Ya a few months later. When forming the group, McCluskey had said, quote, "I wanted a cross between Baby Spice Girls meets manga cartoon," and this mindset continued in the group's early promotion. In 2000, Atomic Kitten embarked on an Asia tour, and they later got their first #1 hit in Japan with Cradle. Sensing there was potential for growth in that sector, they released a Japan-exclusive version of their debut album in March, which came out several months before the UK release. By October, Atomic Kitten had released several singles with accompanying music videos, and while some of them had cracked the top 10 in the UK, the bubblegum pop record still fell flat with European audiences. The label was so disappointed by this turnout that they actually wound up dropping them. McCluskey never told the girls this, and instead convinced the label to let them release one last song. Luck was on their side, and Whole Again was a smash hit, reaching #1 in several countries. While this would ordinarily be an amazing opportunity, Atomic Kitten had a problem. A year prior, Carrie Katona had begun dating Brian McFadden of the Irish boy band Westlife, and shortly before the release of Whole Again, she discovered that she was pregnant. She promptly announced that she would be leaving the group, but how were they supposed to promote their biggest hit without their third member? Thankfully, they found a solution rather quickly, tapping Jenny Frost as her replacement. Jenny had been a member of Precious, who had been the UK's Eurovision entry back in 1999, but with the group disbanding in 2000, she was free to join Atomic Kitten. The success of Whole Again inspired the label to reissue the album, adding a handful of new songs and having Jenny perform Carrie's parts on any of the old ones, and this new version flew straight to the top of the charts, eventually being certified double platinum. They began recording their second album, but McCluskey and Kershaw frequently butted heads with the record company, who wanted them to keep making songs that sounded like Whole Again. Tensions got to a point that the pair left the project midway through, and McCluskey was forbidden from reaching out to any of the members of the group he had founded for several years. Rob Davis was brought in to finish the album, and in September 2002, Atomic Kitten released Feels So Good. The album had several hits, including The Tide Is High, and the music video might have been one of the first times I remember seeing a pop star perform while pregnant. Natasha Hamilton helped promote Feels So Good up until she gave birth, and when the group embarked on their Southeast Asia tour in 2003, she brought her son along with her. That year, they tried breaking into the US market with a compilation album, and even after getting Disney to put one of their songs on the Lizzie McGuire movie soundtrack, it failed to chart, and their name recognition was practically non-existent stateside. They made the decision to stick to the UK, Europe, and Asia, and released their third studio album, Ladies' Night, which reached the top 10 in several countries. In March 2004, they went on tour to promote Ladies' Night and their upcoming Greatest Hits album, which wound up becoming a goodbye of sorts, as the group announced their plans to go on an extended hiatus once the tour was finished. This came as quite a shock to fans as they were still at the top of their game, but years later, Natasha revealed the true reason. After being diagnosed with postpartum depression, her doctors recommended that she take a break from Atomic Kitten, but with the rest of the group having no intention to replace her, it was decided that they'd simply wait until she felt better. Over the next few years, they occasionally teamed back up, releasing the odd single here and there, and even making a few live performances. But in 2012, they had their first real comeback on the big reunion. However, the lineup was a bit different than expected, with Carrie Katona returning instead of Jenny Frost. Allegedly, Jenny had been invited to the reunion, but was unable to join as she was pregnant at the time, and the incident caused a rift between her and the other members. They seemed set on bringing back this version of Atomic Kitten, saying they intended to go on tour and record a new album, but these plans were cancelled with very little explanation. And in 2017, Carrie confirmed that she was no longer a member of the group. Natasha Hamilton and Liz McLarnon continued to perform together, with Jenny Frost briefly joining them in 2021. But in 2024, Natasha confirmed that she would be leaving Atomic Kitten to embark on a solo career. Speaking of English girl groups that never made it big in the US, we've got to talk about the Sugababes. Although they were originally signed as solo artists, in 1998, 13-year-old Mattia Buena, Siobhan Donaghy, and Keisha Buchanan were brought together to form the Sugababes, but their label felt their name was too juvenile, and it was changed to Sugababes. Their manager, Ron Tom, who had previously formed the 90s girl group All Saints, liked how diverse they looked, and decided to lean into that message with a more urban sound. They released their debut single, Overload, in 2000, which received widespread praise for its unique direction, and it was even nominated for Best British Single at the Brit Awards. They released their first album, One Touch, later that year, and despite positive reception, it didn't perform as well as the record company expected, and they were dropped. Rumors began to spread that the girls didn't get along, which seemed to be confirmed when Siobhan left the group, and Heidi Range, who was in the first iteration of Atomic Kitten, would go on to replace her. In 2002, the Sugababes signed to a new record label and began working on their second album, Angels with Dirty Faces, which became a massive success, later being certified triple platinum. And the electronic R&B direction really stood out in the sea of bubblegum pop. They released their third album in 2003 and leaned into the bad girl image they'd been assigned by the press, embracing a sexier look that was clearly intended to differentiate them from more tween-friendly groups like Play. Mattia gave birth to her first child in 2005, but continued promoting Sugababes' fourth album, Taller in More Ways. However, by the end of the year, she had officially left the group, citing a desire to spend more time with her daughter, as well as recovery from postpartum depression. 21-year-old Amel Bareba was brought in as her replacement, and similar to Atomic Kitten, Sugababes made the decision to re-release their latest album with her new vocals. This switch-up didn't seem to hinder them in the slightest, and over the next few years they continued to release successful albums, and in 2007 they even collaborated with Mattel on a line of dolls, although they were only ever released in the UK, proving that they didn't have much pull in the US. Safe to say that things seemed to be going well, but in 2009, fans were shocked when Keisha Buchanan announced that she'd been forced out of the group against her will. According to the remaining members, they had actually wanted to quit the Sugababes themselves as they found Keisha too difficult to work with. And when confronted with this possibility, the label decided it was easier to replace just one person instead of two, which they did, with new recruit Jade Ewan filming the music video for About a Girl just days after Keisha was kicked out. At this point, the group didn't have a single founding member left in it, and they were essentially the Sugababes in name alone. This understandably confused fans, and their album, Sweet 7, was both a critical and commercial failure, resulting in them being dropped by their label once again. Throughout the 2010s, Heidi, Jade, and Amel mentioned that the Sugababes were still together and there were plans to record a new album, but it never came to fruition, with the girls embarking on solo projects instead.
We're not planning anything at the moment, but we haven't broke up or anything, just doing our own little thing for a while.
During this time, the original lineup from 1998 made the surprise decision to reunite, naming their new old group after themselves, Mattia, Keisha, Siobhan. They released their first single, Flatline, in 2013, which got the type of positive feedback they'd seen earlier in their careers. That same year, they discussed their plans to win back the rights to the Sugababes name, and in 2019, they were finally successful. In 2022, they independently released the Lost Tapes, a collection of songs they'd recorded a decade earlier. And I really love the sexy, sultry vibes they have going on, which highlighted how much they'd grown not just as artists, but as women. Now in their 40s, the Sugababes are still going strong, a testament to how time spent apart can sometimes make you grow closer, and they're currently working on their 9th album. There are tons of other girl groups from the 2000s and 2010s that we haven't even gotten to, so if you'd be interested in a part 2, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!